Heaven Official's Blessing. Tian Guan Ci Fu by Mo Xiang Tong Xiu. Read by Plant Bones. Chapter 13. Entering Ghost City. The Crown Prince chances upon the Ghost King. Much ashamed, it wasn't until 4 hours later that Celian had the time to sneak a peek at his scroll to finally learn this Windmaster's backstory. The 5 elemental masters of the heavenly realm use their titles in place of their surnames. For example, before the Earthmaster ascended, his mortal name was Ming Yi. After ascension, he was addressed as Earthmaster Yi. As for the Windmaster, his former name was Xue, but after ascension, he was called Windmaster Qingxuan. I don't know why I said water there. Befitting of his old title, his personality was like a breeze. He was sociable and generous, caring about petty details, and very popular in the heavens, as was apparent from him easily tossing out 10,000 merits in the communication array. But at the end of the day, as his older brother was the god who controlled mortal wealth, of course the Windmaster was generous and uncaring about petty details. Indeed, the older brother of the Windmaster Qingxuan was the one they called Water Tyrant, the Watermaster Wudu. Descending to the lower realms together, the two gods walked side by side, chatting as they traveled. Celian had his arms crossed, and he commented sincerely, "The Pei family producing 2 ascended generals under one name was already a legend. But you and your brother ascending at the same time, one wind, one water, that's truly a tale of wonder." It must be known that in a million people, there might not even be one with the ability to ascend. Pei Ming and Pei Xiu were separated by a few hundred years, and Pei Xiu wasn't even a direct descendant. He was from Pei Ming's brother's branch of the family, a grand who knows how many times nephew. The Watermaster Wudu and the Windmaster Xingxuan were true blood-related brothers, a genuine pair of ascended officials from the same house, and thus truly incredible. Xie Qingxuan laughed it off. "It's nothing! My brother and I grew up in the same place, went to school under the same teacher, and cultivated in the same path, so naturally we'd ascend together in the same lifetime." That was something Celian also learned when he was cramming from the scroll earlier. Of the 2 elemental masters, Shiwudu ascended first, but only a few years. His brother Qingxuan also successfully transcended a heavenly tribulation. Mortals often worshipped these 2 heavenly officials together in the same temple and praised them as equals. It was obvious that the 2 brothers enjoyed an excellent relationship. The Watermaster must be the reason why Pei Ming wouldn't touch the Windmaster, as San Lang and Nanfeng had mentioned. After all, the brother of the Water Tyrant was not one to be picked on so easily. Thus, having thought thus far, another point came to Celian's mind. He considered before asking, "Lord Windmaster, at the Palace of Divine Might, from the way General Pei spoke, it sounded as if he shared a friendship with your brother. Won't your filling of the complaint against General Pei Jr. affect—" "Nah," Xie Qingxuan replied. "My brother already knows I can't stand Pei Ming." "Knowing is one thing, acting is another," Celian said. "Won't this cause a rift between Lord Watermaster and General Pei?" "If it causes a rift, even better. I wish my brother would stop hanging out with him and leave that 3 tumors label behind one day," Xie Qingxuan said. Celian stopped. "3 tumors?" Xie Qingxuan exclaimed, astonished. "What? You don't know about that either? Fine, all right. I know you're not up to date on anything. You can just listen for giggles. The 3 tumors is the moniker given to the 3 heavenly officials who have a bad rep with basically everyone, but are best buddies with each other. Namely, Mingguang, Lingwen, and my brother." "I can't believe it's not Celian, and Celian," Celian thought. Xie Jingxuan fanned his Windmaster fan and continued. Even if I can't stand him, the whole business this time was around the whole business this time around was little Pei's fault. There's no way I'd let pin this on the state preceptor of Banyi and protect little Pei. It doesn't matter if you're a mortal or a god or a ghost. You have to be responsible for your own actions. Bullying is a little girl is low. The last line was uttered in contempt, and Celian smiled. The Windmaster is a defender of justice. Xie Jingxuan laughed. You're not so bad yourself. I heard rumors here and there about Baiyue Pass, but I never had the time to investigate. Plus, my brother would yell at me about it. With so much on my plate, I'd forgotten. When I heard you ask about it in the communication array the other day, it reminded me that there was such a case pending, and so I went to check it out. Turns out that not only did you ask, you even went there yourself? So I thought, dang, what a guy! This Windmaster certainly had an extremely straightforward and interesting personality, and Xiaolian could understand now why he was so popular in the heavens. He smiled, surprised to have made the acquaintance of such a heavenly official in the upper court. But just as he turned his head to face him, the white-clad cultivator beside him had transformed into a lady Taoist in white. It was so sudden, Xiaolian almost stumbled in his step. Lord Windmaster, why the sudden transformation? Oh? And truth be told, Your Highness, I'm actually more powerful in this form. Sitting Shen preened her long hair. As was mentioned earlier, the Windmaster and Watermaster were often worshipped together. However, this also produced a bizarre accident. Perhaps people thought that a single temple worshipping two male gods together was lacking something. Lords and ladies go hand in hand, so people thought having one male god and one female god would make it seem more complete. Thus, someone took a certain initiative, and that initiative was to sculpt the Windmaster as a goddess. But it didn't end with the goddess statue. They had to make up stories to go with it, too. Things like the water and wind gods being brother and sister. There was even a version where they were husband and wife. After a few centuries, the falsehoods spread, and from them came even more outlandish legends. The two heavenly officials once read through the tales on a whim and cringed so hard their goosebumps practically spilled off of them. Nonetheless, there were more than a few who believed in those outrageous stories, and thus did the Windmaster's gender become confused. My lady, prithee watch over me, could be heard all over the place. Thus, Xie Xuan was also known by the moniker Lady Windmaster. Although silly, such absurd occurrences were not rare. Ling Wen, for example, had a similar experience. She was a lady heavenly official, but she never dressed flamboyantly like other celestial maidens. She often dressed in black attire. She was a she was competent and efficient, and she spent her days working madly through stacks and stacks of administrative scrolls at her palace. If one should ask any mortal, is Ling Wen man or woman? Any one of them would respond with confidence, a man. And although her personality was partly to blame, much of it was due to another reason. Come now, of course the civil god must be male. For that alone, when Lingwen ascended, she suffered brutal disadvantages. She was a civil goddess, but many in the mortal realm thought, how could a woman ever reach that position? Excuse me. She was a civil goddess, but many in the mortal realm thought, how could a woman ever reach that position? How could a lady possibly ensure good fortune in scholarly pursuits? She must not be effective. Thus, no matter how hard she worked, she still had only a few devotees. As time went on, some of her temple attendants were so upset by this treatment that they rebuilt her statues into male forms, transforming Lingwen Yuanjun into Lingwen Zwenjun, and crafted their own astonishing legends and backstories. After this change, her temples became prosperous, and everyone praised how effective Lingwen was. But in truth, it was still the same heavenly official. Her spiritual powers never changed, and the legends were all fake. Still, people ate them up. Since then, whenever Lingwen needed to appear in dreams or show herself to mortals, she could only do so in male form. By the same logic, because people believed that it had to be a man and a woman together holding down the fort in the Temple of Wind and Water, that was how it became. Who cared whether you are a god or a ghost? You were whatever people believed you to be. Appearances could be a million miles off the mark from the real thing, and people would still see what they wanted to see. It was something the upper court heavenly officials had long since stopped fretting over. As for Shi Xuan, from Xielian's own observations, he didn't appear to mind at all. In fact, he was completely immersed and enjoying himself. Not only that, he was even passionate about dragging others into it, making Xielian wonder about the real gender of the lady in black who was with the lady in master before. In the 4 hours they had spent traveling down from the heavenly realm together, Xuan had tirelessly tried to persuade Xielian to disguise himself as a woman, with extremely convincing reasons, such as, women have stronger yin energy, therefore it'll be much easier for you to hide in the ghost city crowds. Xielian thought about it, but then courteously rejected the idea. I don't have enough spiritual energy to transform. To that, Xuan replied enthusiastically, I'll lend you mine! Isn't that the whole reason why the Heavenly Emperor appointed me to this mission? My lord, please save your powers for when we're actually fighting the enemy. Xuan couldn't persuade Xielian, so she stopped pushing. By that time, the two had reached the wild field in the By that time, the two had reached a wild field in the middle of nowhere. The night had deepened, and the crows cawed raucously in the pitch-black woods. The air was ominous and desolate. Xielian watched for a moment before he said, Let's wait here. This place is thick with yin energy, and there's a large graveyard nearby, so there should be at least one or two going to the market. We'll follow them when the time comes. Thus, the pair crouched on top of a burial mound and waited. They weren't in that position for very long, when Xuan reached into a sleeve, rummaged around, and dug out a small jug of liquor. You want some? Xielian reached for the jug and took a sip, felt his throat burn, and gave the jug back. Thanks. Xuan took the jug and gulped down a couple of swallows. You can't drink? I can, Xielian replied, but excessive drinking causes insanity, so a simple taste is enough. What time is it? Xuan hummed and replied, It's midnight. Should be about time then, Xielian said. Just as he finished his sentence, the two saw a faint row of lights appear deep in the woods. That faint row of lights slowly came closer and closer. When it emerged from this forest, the two finally saw that the group of expressionless women dressed in white, walking in a line. Some were old, some were young, some were beautiful, some were ugly. Each of them was wearing funeral garb and had a white lantern in hand, walking at an easy pace. They had to be female ghosts heading to the ghost city markets in the deep night. Let's follow them, Xielian whispered. Xuan nodded, took a last swig from the jug, and tossed it aside. They then stood up and casually trailed behind the group of ghosts. The two had already prepared by erasing their spiritual aura. When they walked, they were like person-shaped logs without the scent of life. The band of female ghosts before them held their white lanterns and followed an unknown path in the dark woods, strolling while chatting in delicate voices. I'm so glad Ghost City is open again. I need a facial. What happened to your face? Didn't you just get one? Another replied. The first one responded.
It rotted again. Oh, the one who served me last time said it was guaranteed fresh for a year, but it hasn't even been half that.
Xialian and Xue Qingxuan trailed behind them, listening to their chatter, and didn't speak a word. When they heard something funny, at most their lips would twitch, and they'd share looks with each other. After about an hour, the group came to a valley. A faint red light emitted from deep within, and there was music wafting in the ethereal light. Xialian grew more and more curious to finally see for himself what Ghost City looked like. Yet unexpectedly, just as they were entering the valley, the last ghost in the line suddenly turned her head and discovered them. Confused, she asked,
Who are you two?
The question made all the ghastly, pale-faced heads turn, and the women surrounded them, curious.
When did they start following us?
These two weren't a part of the group when we left the burial grounds. Which burial ground did you come from? How come I've never seen your faces before? Xialian cleared his throat. We came from a burial ground much farther away, so of course you've never seen us. Xie Qingxuan smiled too. That's right! We traveled a long way just to reach Ghost City. The white-clad female ghosts were silent and stared at them expressionlessly. If they were anyone else, they'd probably fall to the ground, shivering in fright. Cillian wasn't afraid of having their identities exposed, though. These meek female ghosts could hardly threaten them. Still, since Ghost City was right before their eyes, it wouldn't be wise to start anything so close to their target, lest they alert their enemy. Just then, one of the women staring at Sheching Xuan spoke up languidly.
Mei Mei, your face is so nicely maintained.
Xialian and Sheching Xuan were taken aback. Then the two immediately nodded uniformly. Xialian replied, It's all right. It's not bad. Xie Qingxuan copied in his tone and said, Pretty good, right? All the female ghosts then approached and started a discussion.
Yeah, not rotten at all. Mei Mei, where'd you get your face done? What's your secret? Can you recommend a place?
Xie Qingxuan didn't know how to respond, so she only laughed awkwardly to delay answering. Just then, the group turned around and suddenly, crimson light flooded Celian's vision. A strange and mysterious world opened before him. They were on a long street. It was so long there was no end in sight. Along the edges of the great street were all types of bustling stores and stalls. Colorful signs flew high above, and giant red lanterns were hung below. People filled the streets, most wearing masks of faces, crying, laughing, angry. Some human, some not human. Those without masks could only be described as bizarre. Some had large heads and small bodies, some skinny as a bamboo stick, some flat like a pancake and pressed to the ground, complaining as pedestrians walked all over them. Xialian was careful not to step on anything weird. When he passed by a food stall, he saw the stall owner use a giant bone to furiously stir a giant pot of soup. While stirring, saliva spilled from between the stall owner's teeth, dripping into the soup. In that weird, many-colored soup, he could see eyeballs floating. Celian watched and was filled with a sudden sense of confidence. On the other side, there were strange buskers performing. A buff, burly man had a small ghost, weak as a chick in his clutches, and the man opened his mouth to blow massive flames and barbecued the small ghost while it squealed and writhed like a pig being slaughtered. The spectators cheered and shrieked, shouting, Bravo! There were even insane individuals randomly throwing money into the air, the paper fluttering in the sky like drifting snow. Excuse me again. When one slip of it flew before Celian, he nabbed it and flipped it over. It was the money of the dead, as he thought. Continuing down the street, there was a butcher stall with a row of languishing, pallid human heads hung in order of age, as indicated on their price tags. A child's meat was this much, a youth's meat was that much, a grown man's meat cost this much, a mature woman's meat went for that much. The cartilage sold for this. The apron-clad butcher, knife in hand, was a boar with thick black hair. What it was chopping under its knife was a muscular human leg, still twitching. This was truly a swarm of evil, a carnival of hell. Humans butchering pigs was a common sight, but pigs butchering humans wasn't. So Celian couldn't help but steal a few extra peeks. The boar noticed him watching, though, and immediately reacted. "What you looking at? You buying?" Celian shook his head. No. The boar butcher continued to chop violently onto the cutting board, blood spraying all over. He yelled, voice rough. "If you ain't buying, then don't watch. The fuck you trying to start something? Get out of here." Celian got out of there. But just as his steps quickened, he suddenly realized something very bad. That group of female ghosts in Cixing Xuan had disappeared without a trace. Shocked, Celian wanted to connect with the Windmaster at once within the communication array, afraid that she was really dragged away by those ghosts to do facials. However, this was Ghost City, and the communication spells used by the Heavenly Realm were restricted. The connection to the array didn't work, so he had no choice but to wander the streets aimlessly in search of the missing Windmaster. As he walked, someone suddenly grabbed him. Already alert and tense, Celian reacted instantly. The one who stopped him was a woman. She was surprised by Celian's reaction, but after seeing his face clearly, she started giggling, playing coy. "Hey there, little Gaga. You're looking mighty fine." This woman was in an exceedingly revealing dress, her makeup terrifyingly loud. The white powder was uneven, and when she opened her mouth, clumps of it would flake off of her face. Her bosom was stuffed full, as if something were packed under her flesh. Truly a shocking sight. Celian gently pushed away her thin, claw-like fingers and said, "Miss, there's no need to speak like that." The woman was stunned at first, then burst out laughing. "Oh, dear Lord, Miss? Who still calls me Miss in this day and age?" The people around them all seemed to think this was funny too, and they started laughing along. Xiaolian shook his head. Before he could speak, though, the woman pounced on him. "Oh, don't go. Lil Gaga, I like you. Come and have fun with me all night. I won't ask for money." She pouted and winked. "But I will charge." What a sin. Xiaolian repented inwardly, then kindly but firmly pushed her away. He chided gently. "Miss, please." Yet the woman suddenly appeared to be annoyed and screeched, "Stop calling me Miss! Ain't no one who cares for it. Quit wasting my time. Are you coming or not?" To tempt Celian further, the woman suddenly unlaced her already revealing shirt. Her boldness caught Celian off guard, and he didn't stop her in time. So he sighed softly again, turning his eyes away. He continued on his way, stepping around her. However, the female ghost stopped him again and continued her teasing. "Do you like what you see?" Little did she realize, Celian had grown up in the royal holy temple, practicing abstinence for most of his mortal life, and his body and mind had always been guarded, and as steady as the mountains. It didn't matter what he saw, his heart was as still as water. Anything unseemly would make him automatically chant the Tao Te Ching sonorously in his mind, keeping him completely indifferent. Unsuccessful in her temptation, the female ghost's expression changed, and she tisked. "You don't want any of this? Not even for free? Are you even a man?" Celian moved his eyes away. "I am. Then prove it, the female ghost yelled. From the sidelines, passerby laughed mockingly. You slut! He thinks you're old and ugly. And want none of you. You doing being so clingy? Hearing those words, Celian deadpanned with a straight face. That's not it. It's because I have an unspeakable affliction. I can't get erect. Everyone was stunned. Then, in a flash, boisterous laughter erupted. The victim of ridicule was now Celian. None had ever met a man who was brave enough to announce in public that he had such a problem. However, to someone like Celian, it didn't matter in the least whether his root of evil could sin or not. So he developed a habit of using that as an excuse to get out of these kinds of situations. And it was a method that worked exceedingly excellently every single time. Sure enough, the female ghost redid her shirt immediately and stopped pestering her. No wonder you're like this. Pig! If you have a problem, why don't you say it sooner? Not far behind them, the boar butcher chopped down again and yelled, Fucking slut! What's that you say? What's wrong with pigs? The female ghost wasn't scared and yelled right back. Yeah, what's wrong with pigs? Fucking animals! Soon the long street was filled with shouting and squawking and people hollering. That ghost woman Lang Chang is starting shit again. Butcher Zoo is chopping ghosts. The two sides rowdily started tearing into each other, and in the midst of that pandemonium, Celian was able to slip away. After he'd put some distance between them, he looked back toward the crowd and heaved a sigh. Celian walked a bit more, and soon he came upon further commotion ahead. He stopped in front of a gigantic red building. The building was extraordinary in its grand and imposing style. Its columns, roofs, walls, and everything were painted a magnificent bright red, and the floors were covered in thick, exquisite carpet. If it must be compared, this building was on par with heaven's palaces. The only difference was one of aesthetics. This place was more spectacular and sumptuous than stately and dignified. Crowds flowed in and out of the doors, loud, excited voices boomed from the inside. Very lively. Upon a closer look, Celian saw that this place appeared to be a gambler's den. Celian walked up to the doors, and on two pillars at the entrance there was a set of couplets. The left said money over life, and the right said gains over shame. On the top horizontal beam it said ha 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 ha. The lines were vulgar and crass, not worthy of being entrance couplets. The calligraphy was wild, clumsy, and frenzied. A disgrace to call it calligraphy at all. It was as if someone had took a brush while drunk and scribbled with foul intent, and then the words were blown over by a blast of evil aura to form it. Celian was once heir to the throne, and he was taught calligraphy by the finest teachers in the land. The characters he saw before him now were a real tragedy. In fact, the characters were so hellish that Celian started to think they were kind of funny and shook his head. The Windmaster wouldn't be hanging around here, he thought. I'll have a better chance searching the beauty parlors for female ghosts. He certainly should have just moved on. Yet, inexplicably, after only a few steps, he turned back around and went inside. In the main hall of the gambler's den, the crowd was packed in, from wall to wall. Innumerable heads were moving, and laughter and desperate cries alike choked the air. Celian had only descended a few steps when he suddenly heard screaming, and we looked where it had come from. 4 masked bouncers were walking over carrying a guest. The man appeared to be in excruciating pain, writhing and howling while being carried, gushing blood that he left in his wake. Both of his legs had been cleanly cut off at the knees. and blood was spewing everywhere. A small ghost followed closely and greedily licked up all the blood on the floors as it went. It was a horrifying sight, yet no one in the gambler's den spared it a glance. They continued to shout and cheer, rolling about. Of course, most who gambled here weren't humans, and if they were no ordinary humans. Xialian twisted in place to let the 4 bouncers carrying the man pass by, and then he continued deeper into the den. A petite attendant in a laughing mask approached to welcome. Gongzi, are you here to play? Xialian replied with a smile. I don't have any money on me. Mind if I just look? In his experience, the moment you said those words in any establishment, you'd get booted. Why would you enter without money? Yet the petite attendant just giggled. No money is not a problem. Those who come here to play don't usually use money to gamble. Really? Xialian asked. The petite attendant covered her mouth. Really, Gongzi? Please, come with me. She waved at Xialian, beckoning him, and sashayed away. Xialian followed her without a word, but carefully observed all around him. Inside and out, this gambler's den was exceedingly extravagant and stylish, but not at all tacky. It was a building rich with taste. The petite attendant brought Xialian to the very back of the main hall, to a long table that was packed like sardines with guests. Xialian had only just approached when he heard a man cry, I bet my arm! There were too many onlookers. Xialian couldn't get through and could only listen from the outskirts of the crowd. Suddenly, he heard another voice lazily respond. No need. Never mind your arm. Even your shit life is worthless here. Hearing that voice, Xialian's heart suddenly jumped. He silently mouthed the name, Sunman. He'd indeed just heard the voice of that young man, yet it was slightly deeper than he remembered, which was precisely why it sounded even more pleasing to the ears. Despite being surrounded by boisterous bruja, the voice still rang loud and clear, and cut through the cacophony of the gambler's den to reach him. Xialian looked up, and only then did he notice that behind the long table there was a screen curtain, and behind the curtain he could see a faint red figure lying back, lounging on a chair.